Many Buddhists think that meditation is the only way to be enlightened. But there is sufficient evidence in the Buddhist literature itself that there are several means of enlightenment, applicable to different persons according to their different types of personalities or mentalities. However, only a Buddha can see in which way one could be enlightened. But if one's instinctive wisdom is matured enough, one would be able to find out for oneself one's own way of enlightenment, hidden within oneself. Because the entire Four Noble Truths called suffering, cause of suffering, cessation of suffering, and the means for the cessation of suffering is hidden within every enlightened being. That is why Buddha, just before his passing away, advised his unenlightened disciples, saying, Atta Deepa Viharata, Atta Sarana, Na Anya Sarana. It means be a light unto yourself. Meaning that one should make use of the light of one's own instinctive wisdom called insight of wisdom for one's enlightenment. It is to awaken this insight of instinctive wisdom that the Buddha taught the meditation called insight meditation, called Vipassana Bhavana. And that bhavana or that meditation, Buddhist meditation, is well explained in details in the discourse called Maha Satipatthana Sutta. It may be due to a statement at the beginning of this discourse that many Buddhists think that this meditation is the only way to be enlightened. The statement of the Buddha's words are like this: Ekayano ayam bhikkhave maggo sattanang visuddhya nibbānassa saccikiriyāya. The word or the term ekayano has been wrongly translated as only way, only magga, ekayano. But when you directly get the direct meaning of the verbal meaning of this term, ekayano, eka means one, ayana means moving, going. Therefore, ekayano maggo, maggo is the path. Therefore, ekayano maggo can be translated as a path that only one can travel. Because Buddhist meditation has to be done by oneself. It is by observing oneself. Oneself means one's own mind. What we call ourself is our mind. The mind is a process of thinking, thoughts, based on the content of the mind. The content of the mind are the memories stored up in our brain cells. It is by using those memories that the thinking process get activated. And that content of the mind contains not only the memories of the present life, but all the accumulated memories of all the past lives. Buddha says he himself cannot see the beginning of our existence in different lives in this samsara. Anamataggo vayam sansaro pubbha koti napanyayati. That is how Buddha says, I myself cannot see how my own existence in this world started. It's very, very far away, beyond our memories. And all those memories are latent in our own brain, in our own mind. It is by observing the activities of those memories that one can realize who oneself is. The ultimate realization is that there is no self. In fact, Jiddu Krishnamurti, who had never read books on Buddhism, who had never studied Buddhism, found through his own insight of wisdom the only technique for emancipation or realization of the ultimate truth that we call nirvana is self-observation, observation of oneself. It is this observation of oneself Buddha termed as vipassana bhavana. In Satara Satipatthana, that is called Chatusatipatthana, Mahasatipatthana Sutta, Buddha says one has to observe fourfold activities. They are physical activities, Kaya-anupaksana. Then the activities of our feelings, called Vedana-anupassana. Then the activities of our thinking, called Chitta-anupassana. And ultimately, Dhamma-anupassana, the latent, hidden content of our own mind by going deeper and deeper into our own mind. But there are number of instances many of the Buddha's disciples got enlightened in different ways. Therefore, we cannot say meditation is the only way to be enlightened. In the Vakkali Sutta, in the Samyutta Nikaya of the Buddhist canon, Reverend Vakkali got enlightened by committing suicide, by cutting his own neck. In the Channa Sutta too, that is also in the Samyutta Nikaya, Reverend Channa got enlightened in committing suicide by cutting his own neck. Similarly, in the Godika Sutta of the Samyutta Nikaya, Reverend Godika got enlightened in committing suicide by cutting his own neck. These incidents do not say that we all can get enlightened by committing suicide in cutting our necks. In the Chulapantaka Teragatha, that is also in the Buddhist canon, Reverend Chulapantaka got enlightened by rubbing a piece of cloth looking at the rising sun. But we cannot get enlightened by rubbing a piece of cloth, looking at the rising sun. In the Siha Teri Gatha also, there is a saying, Reverend Siha Teri, the nun, got enlightened when she was getting ready to hang herself and commit suicide. In the Patachara Teri Gatha, the nun called Patachara got enlightened when she washed her feet, throwing water onto the feet thrice. When she put it first time, the water went a little distance and got absorbed in the sand. Second time, the water went further. Third time, the water went much further. Then contemplating on this, she sat on her bed to sleep and put out the lamp. While she was putting out the lamp, she got enlightened. We can't get enlightened by hanging ourselves or by putting off our lamps to sleep. Reverend Ananda, he got enlightened when he was trying to lie down on his bed. He did not lie down completely. When he was about to lie down, he got enlightened. After meditating throughout the night, he got tired and he wanted to take a rest, and he was trying to lie down and he got enlightened. But we can't get enlightened by trying to lie down on our bed. There is a minister called Santati. This comes in the commentary, the description of the incident comes in the commentary of the Dhammapada. The commentary is called Dhammapadatta Katha. In the Dandavagga, there is a stanza starting with Alankato Tepi Samanchareya, and ends with saying, so Brahmano, so Samano, so Bhikkhu. This stanza referred to the minister Santati, minister of the Magadha kingdom. While he was listening to the Buddha with all his royal attire on him. And while listening to the Buddha, he passed away, maybe by a heart attack. But by the time he passed away, he was enlightened. Everybody listening to the Buddha won't get enlightened. However, in the commentary on the Mahamangala Sutta, that Buddha preached to deities in his third year of enlightenment, commentary says billions of deities got enlightened by listening to the Mahamangala Sutra recited by the Buddha. But we may listen to that Mahamangala Sutra thousands and thousands times. There is nobody got enlightened in the history of the Buddhist literature. There is nobody recorded got enlightened by listening to the Mahamangala Sutta. There is the Reverend Bahia. He was an ascetic and he was called the Daruchurya. He was wearing cloth made out of dry sticks, small sticks, and dry barks of the rear, and they are called daru. Daru means dry wood, wooden cloth. He had a wooden cloth, and he got enlightened by listening to the Buddha for a few seconds, standing on the highway. Nobody else got enlightened. Standing on the highway. There is another description in the Sinhalese poetry called Loyada Sangarava, book of poems. There is a stanza or a poem called Dhamata Sarikota Eluyen Pereki Kavyata Sita Pahada Sita Nosaki Sikota Kandapili Vela Dos Noeki Nivanata Sapamini Sangha Satanamaki. It reports to an incident where 60 monks got enlightened by listening to a poem recited by some ladies working in a field. And that poem, according to this poem in Loyada Sangarava, consists of the nature of the world. Dhamata Sarikota, that means impermanence of the body, impermanence of everything, impermanence of life. And contemplating on that idea, the 60. We may contemplate by listening to a song or poem describing the impermanence of the body, impurity of the body, or impermanence of the nature, but we may not get enlightened. All these incidents show that there is no particular way in which one could get enlightened. But that way one has to find by oneself. As I mentioned earlier, the last advice of the Buddha was, be a light unto yourself. That means the light of wisdom. What is the light of wisdom? Insight. What is the insight? Inner sight into one's own mind. By observing one's own mind, one will be able to get enlightened, because the way of enlightenment of every individual is hidden within one's own mind. The suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the means of ending suffering is within oneself. Therefore, when one's wisdom is matured, one may be able to discover for oneself how one can get enlightened. However, Krishnamurti rejected all methods of enlightenment, all paths of enlightenment. And he never preached how one can get enlightened. A system or method. According to my experience, I have listened to hundreds and hundreds of his speeches. I have seen him several times. And I can infer from his preachings and behavior that he is a holy person, enlightened. He was the greatest sage, according to my experience, that lived in the last century. He was born in 1895 and he passed away in 1986. And he preached his doctrine for more than 60 years throughout the world. But he never had a disciple who got enlightened or awakened as he himself got awakened. Now this is the difference between a Buddha and a silent Buddha. Buddha can get enlightened without the guidance of any teacher, but he can guide others also to get enlightened. But a silent Buddha, according to the Buddhist tradition, the doctrine, the literature, can get enlightened without the guidance of any teacher, but he cannot teach others how to get enlightened. Similarly, Krishnamurti also could not teach somebody how to get enlightened, but I have no doubt that he was an enlightened being. When I first saw him, more than 60 years back, when he was coming for a lecture, he was passing me, and I was sitting on the path he was passing by to give his lecture. While he was passing, my entire body and mind, the brain, everything got soaked in a spiritual power, a pure mental power, a purity, as if my own mind got pure. And it was coming from him with a light that was very cool, a cool light. I was being bathed in a cool light of power. And such a power cannot emanate from a human being unless he has got himself enlightened. But unfortunately, he could never teach anybody to get enlightened. It may be that he was born as a stream winner, who is a stream winner in the path of meditation, a person who has no sense of self. The ego gets completely eradicated one get into this stream winning stage called Sotapanna. There is reports in literature about Krishnamurti that he was a disciple under the Buddha. And he must have got Sotapanna at that time. And the records say C.W. Leadbeater, a theosophist who had clairvoyance, extrasensory perception, who could see the auras of different beings, different people. He met Krishnamurti as a very thin, undernourished, weak child playing with his brother in the seashore near Adyar. In Adyar is the place where the theosophical headquarters was, near the headquarters. And he was surprised. The aura of this child, Krishnamurti, had no sense of ego in it, no self in it. And he decided this must be the next world teacher, Jagat Guru. And he was brought up by the Theosophical Society thinking that he was going to be a world teacher. And in 1911, the Theosophical Society formed an organization of about more than 3,000 members. And that organization was called the Order of the Star in the East. The star is Krishnamurti. And they expect to organize a new religion under the leadership of Krishnamurti, to change the world, new religion. But what happened in 1929, he dissolved this organization with a lot of property in it. lot of members in it. He said no organization can emancipate man. No religious organization. He was rejecting all religious organization and all religious traditions for enlightenment. He said the truth, the nirvana, is a pathless land. There is no pathway. According to my judgment, because he had the quality of a silent Buddha, although he himself got enlightened, he did not know to teach others the path to enlightenment. And his conviction was, there is no system, no path, no method, no technique to get enlightened. But during his lifetime, there is cogent evidence that there were 3 enlightened Buddhist monks in Thailand. The first one was called Man Buridatta. He lived from 1870 to 1949. There is cogent evidence that he was an Arhat. Then next to him there was Ajahn Kao Analayo. He lived between 1888 to 1983. There is cogent evidence that he was an Arahant, an enlightened being. The last one was called Mahabhuva Jnana Sampanno, Ajahn Mahabhuva Jnana Sampanno. He lived from 1913 to 2011. And he had written the life story of both Ajahn Man and Ajahn Analayo. And he has written book on the method of Ajahn Man for enlightenment. Patipada called. And by looking at his face, one can gauge that he was really enlightened. And all those 3 monks in Thailand got enlightened by following the Buddhist tradition, the Buddhist method, the Buddhist meditation called Vipassana Bhavana, insight meditation. It is that insight that made them enlightened. But Krishnamurti rejects all traditions. Especially say that he rejects religious traditions, saying that they enslave human mind by conditioning. He wants to free the human mind from all conditioning. But we cannot reject the path laid down by the Buddha for enlightenment, because as I mentioned you, the last true enlightened monks show that still the method or tradition laid down by the Buddha is valid. It is active. Therefore, even though Jiddu Krishnamurti rejects all religious traditions, it is wise and prudent to inquire into the method or technique of enlightenment taught by the Buddha and preserved in its original form in his own words in the Buddhist canon. And there are a number of commentaries on the Buddhist canon. The Buddhist canon contains words spoken by the Buddha. The commentaries contain interpretation of the words, sentences and stanzas made by different scholars and monks, maybe enlightened or non-enlightened. But those words is not the real Dhamma the Buddha taught. They are only symbols of the Dhamma. The ideas in the commentaries cannot be called the real Buddha Dhamma. They are only ideas. As I often refer to, the word Nibbana, Nirvana or Nirvana is not the real Nirvana. The real Nirvana is different from the word. The word is only a symbol. Any description, any idea about Nirvana is not the real Nirvana. The real Nirvana is in us. The Buddha's advice is to discover the real Nirvana in us by exploring our own self. What is self? Our own mind, our own thinking process. Its original advice, as well as, according to him, the advices of all Buddhas for enlightenment, as laid down in the Tripitaka and also especially in the Dhammapada, Sabba Papasa Karanam, Kusala Supasampada, Sachitta Pariyodapanam, Etam Buddhan Sasana. Sabba Papasa Karanam. Abstain from all evil, all phenomenon that make the mind impure. Sabba Papasa Karanam, Kusalasya Upasampada. Avoiding unwholesomeness of mind, sustain the wholesomeness of mind. Sachitta Pariyodapana. Then purify one's own mind. What is purification of the mind? Mind gets contaminated by impurities coming from outside. Our original mind, according to Buddha, Pabhasanam idam bhikkhave citta. It's a radiant mind, pure mind. And that pure radiant mind is within us. Buddhist meditation is an exploring that radiant mind that is within us. And not only discovering that mind, but going beyond the mind. Going beyond the mind means our mind is the product of our brain that contains all our memories accumulated through our existence in the samsara. It is going beyond the brain. Brain is a conditional phenomena. Nirvana is unconditional. It is not born, ajata. It does not happen, abhuta. It cannot be done, akata. And it can be formed, asankata. It is an eternal truth. Behind our transient brain, impermanent mind, impermanent body, impermanent self, beyond that lies the eternal bliss, the eternal truth called nirvana, that we can discover going deeper and deeper into our own mind and going beyond the mind. And the method taught by the Buddha is vipassana. Vipassana here means the insight of wisdom. And it is called sati sampajanya. Sati is awareness. Sampajanya means knowing by wisdom, not by knowledge. Wisdom is beyond brain. Knowledge is the content of the brain. To discover wisdom, we have to go beyond knowledge. Where knowledge ends, wisdom begins. And beyond wisdom lies the supreme bliss of nirvana that can be discovered by every individual once he reached the full maturity of wisdom through experience gathered and accumulated throughout his existence in this world, in this life. Therefore, our life is a center for studies. The study of our own self, the study of our own mind, and going beyond the mind to realize the supreme bliss of nirvana, and will inquire further into the technique of Buddhist meditation given to the world by the Buddha more than 2,600 years ago.